September always flies by. My kids are back in school and my semester finally started, so every day is just packed with stuff. However, with my kids back in school, I have more time to read. This month I was able to read 13 books. That number was largely padded by 5 graphic novels, which I finished, but it was still a great month. In this episode, I will talk about each of the books I read with no spoilers. So let's dive in. The first book I read was The Peculiar Garden of Harriet Hunt. Thanks to NetGalley for giving me a ARC copy of this book. This book is going to be published on December 3rd, so make sure to get your copy. This book is about a young woman named Harriet who is living on her own because her father has mysteriously disappeared. Harriet was forced by her father to be a recluse, so not only is she alone, but she's isolated. She has only one friend who is moving across the country to be with her husband. However, Harriet does have her garden to take care of her. Then, a number of strange people start barging into her life: her new maid, her new betrothed, and her new neighbors. This book was everything I wanted from Wayward that I didn't get. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was a bit predictable, but definitely worth the read. Because this is an arc, I didn't include my favorite quote. The second book I read this month was Words of Radiance. I, like many, am rereading the Stormlight archives to prepare for the fifth and final book, well, sort of the Stormlight archives. If you're a fan of epic fantasy and you haven't read this series, what are you waiting for? In this book, we follow Kaladin and Shallan as they learn how to navigate their powers that they will need to use shortly. Also, Dalinar learns about his visions and is working to unite the kingdoms of Roshar. This book is an excellent addition to the series and is many people's favorite book. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars because while it's long, it's so fantastic. Here's a quote from the novel. All stories told have been told before. We tell them to ourselves as all men did who ever were, and all men who ever will be. The only things that are new are the names. Books 3 through 7 were book 3 through 6 of Lore Olympus. I cannot say enough good things about the Lore Olympus series. I love the vibrant colors and how the author uses the art to tell the story. I also love the modern take on the Hades to Persephone story. It's so fun to see a classic piece with modern themes. I do not read graphic novels often, but this book is 100% worth it. I rate this series a 4.5 stars. I'm very excited to see how the story progresses. Again, there aren't really long quotations, but here are a couple of panels to show you the artwork. The 8th book I read this month was The Empire of Silence, which is a great first novel for a series. While there were moments of this book that were painfully slow, I overall enjoyed it. In the novel, Hadrian Marlowe is a young man from a noble house in this planet. This is a space opera, and I think it's like 10,000 years after Red Rising. They have a very similar structure and that kind of Roman vibe. So I feel like if you liked Red Rising, you're going to like this as well. Hadrian is a young man who is displeased with how the government is running society. It's a theocracy based government based on corrupt principles. So instead of choosing to join this religious sect, Hadrian tries to run away and control his own fate. However, while on the run, he gets stuck on a backwater planet far from his destination. It's there that he starts to take fate into his own hands. The narration style of this novel is interesting because it's told from an older Hadrian, telling us about his conquests and telling us about how he got started. So he often tells us things before they're going to happen. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars, and I've heard that the next book just really kicks off the series, so I'm super excited for that one. Here's a quote from the book. "The man who hopes for the future delays its arrival, and the man who dreads it summons it to its door." Book 9 was my favorite book of the month, and that was The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. This is a beautiful retelling of the life of Christ through the eyes of his wife. Anna is a young girl growing up in Israel around 30 CE. She is forced by her parents to be betrothed to an old man, but as she's going to meet him, she instead meets Jesus. Anna doesn't want to be married. All she wants to do is write stories and tell stories of the women that came before her. The book follows Anna as she marries Jesus and tries to find herself again. I love the powerful stories of Anna and the women in her life, such as Mary, Jesus' mother, and her friends and her aunt. Although we do not get many scenes from Christ's ministry in the novel, we can see how Jesus was a person and not just a savior. I rated this book 6 out of 5 stars. I don't think I've cried as hard as I cried in any book than I did in this book. It's beautiful. Here's a quote from the novel. "When I tell you all shall be well, I don't mean that life won't bring you tragedy. Life will be life. I only mean that you will be well in spite of it. All will be well, no matter what." The 10th book I read this month was Hum. This book had so much potential. I really liked it, but the end ruined it for me. In this novel, May is a mother of two who is trying to make ends meet after losing her job to an AI program. She goes to get a surgery done, making her family more money to survive. Also, to go to a botanical garden that reminds her of her childhood. This book is a dystopian thriller, but I cannot say I'd recommend it. I rated this book maybe 3 out of 5 stars. Here's a quote from the novel. "Their time here was brief, yes, slipping through their fingers, but it occurred to her that every day was not 24 hours. It was actually 96, each of the four of them living in their own 24 hours side by side." The 11th book I read this month was The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This was a very cute fall romance. It was a perfect palate cleanser for all the epic fantasy and hard-hitting novels I've been reading lately. I loved getting to know the main character, Janie, as she's trying to find herself in a new place after seeing her boss die at his job. This is a grumpy ex-sunshine, and it was a great time. I rated the book 3.5 stars. Thank you, Libro FM, for gifting me this copy. Here's a quote from the novel. "She wasn't so much afraid of dying as she was of forgetting to live her life. Somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten to figure out who she was or what she wanted to be when she grew up." Move over, Emily Henry and Abby Jimenez. The new star of my favorite romance novel now goes to The Vows by Jessica Joyce. Once I started this novel, I literally couldn't put it down. In this book, Georgia is helping her friend Sam plan his wedding, but everything that could go wrong is going wrong. The DJ breaks his leg, the venue catches on fire. It's just a mess. So fixer and best woman Georgia is there to help. Unfortunately, that means she's working with her ex, Eli, who is insistent that he makes this wedding work too. This book, of course, was a romance, but it was also about two people who are trying their best to be the best versions of themselves. I love a romance with a mental health focus. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, making it one of the few romances I gave a 5-star rating this year. I highly recommend you check out this one. Here's a quote from the novel. "Nothing lasts forever. Maybe these rocks will. But it's a beautiful and painful reminder that no feeling does, good or bad, no moment or mistake." Book 13 is a collection of stories by Ken Lui. There is something for everyone in this book. There are a number of sci-fi pieces, but there are also a number of historical and contemporary fiction. My favorite story was The Matchbox. It takes place in a world where everyone's soul is born as an object with them, a pencil, a book, something to that effect. In this story, the main character's soul is a block of ice, and she's afraid to live her life away from a freezer. Most of the stories in this book are about Chinese Americans or people living in mainland China. This book made me cry, and it helped me to think about ideas with fresh eyes. I highly recommend this novel, and I believe it is being published today, so make sure you go order it now. I rated this collection 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't love all the pieces, but most of them are fantastic. Here's a quote from the author about this craft. We spend our entire lives trying to tell stories about ourselves. They are the essence of memory. It's how we make living in this unfeeling, accidental universe tolerable. And those are the 13 novels I finished in September. Here are a couple of novels I'm really excited to read in October. I'm finally going to read We've Solved Murders by Richard Osman. It is my neighborhood book club book, and I'm so excited. I've only heard good things. I will also be reading the book Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. I love a good vampire book, so I'm really looking forward to this one. I also want to read All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. I have heard nothing but good things about this one. What are you reading this month? Let me know in the comments. I love a good spooky book for October, but I just can't do horror. So, what are your spooky recommendations? Thrillers too. Put them in the comments. Thanks for listening to this episode of According to Your English Teacher. This month is Scary Month, so I'm going to be talking about my favorite spooky pieces. So make sure you check it out. And as always, happy reading.